Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar. My name is Christopher Bosen and thank you for waiting. Today we're hosting this webinar on sorry, I'm a bit flustered here because I just had another technical problem, but thank you very much. It's the community planning support website, and we're hosting this webinar where we have Morna Rae, who's a community planning team leader, and Neale McIlvanney, who's a strategic planning manager from North Ayrshire, telling about how they've managed to, or how they've attempted to connect spatial and community planning, and how they've managed to merge sort of the strategy for development and strategy for outcomes in community planning. So this didn't come across completely right, but Morna and Neale will be able to tell us in a moment. As some of you may have heard, we have had some technical problems, but hopefully it's all working now. I'm going to unmute Neale and Morna. Now they're self-muted. Nope, here we go. Can you hear us, Neale and Morna?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. We've had some trouble getting you to your computer and my computer to talk to each other. So today you're running from a mobile phone, and we are running the presentation from here. In the room where I'm sitting, we have the Planning for Place team from the Improvement Service. That's Irene, Trevor, and Andrew. So they're going to be joining in it as well. But I think we're just going to hand straight over to you. I think your presentation is about 20 minutes, I believe, or maybe a bit longer. And then after that, there's a Q&A. So anyone who has any questions for you or for the Planning for Place team here, feel free to use the question pane or the chat pane on the right-hand side of your screen, and then we'll follow up on the questions at the end of the webinar. And we're recording the webinar, so hopefully it will be shared afterwards. But we'll hand over to you. And I think it's Morna starting, so you may introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Great, thank you very much. Yep, as you said, my name is Morna Rae and I'm Community Planning Team Leader for North Ayrshire. You'll need to excuse us as we go through the slides because we want to say next slide as we move on, because we're not controlling the slides at our end. So, next slide, please. Thank you. My first few slides set some of the context for what we're going to be talking about this morning. I think it's important to understand the context in which we're working and what we're trying to address in North Ayrshire. This first slide talks about our people and just gives you an overview of some of the challenges that we have in North Ayrshire in terms of inequality. For example, our below Scottish average life expectancy, our challenges in terms of child poverty, unemployment, and our ranking in the Scottish Index of multiple deprivation. So lots of issues that we as a community planning partnership want to address. Next slide. So moving on from our people to our place. We do have a lot of positives in North Ayrshire that we really want to capitalise on. We've got a stunning physical landscape, including the islands of Arran and Cumbria. We've got very good transport links, for example, 30-minute train journey from Irvine, our biggest town, into Glasgow. So as well as having a range of challenges in North Ayrshire, there's obviously a lot that we can capitalise on as well. Next slide. So that was our people, our place, and the third P is our partnership. So firstly, our CPP is a very strong partnership. We've got a clear focus on addressing inequalities with our Partnership for All strategy. We're also keen on innovating and working in new ways. For example, we've been working with Carnegie UK on kindness and some of the institutional barriers to us being kind to each other and to those that we work with in our communities. We're also participating in the Basic Income Pilot, along with 5 City of Edinburgh, Glasgow City, feasibility studies around that. We'll also have a strong focus on place, local identities and local issues and assets. As you'll hear about in a moment, our community planning partners have strong involvement in our locality partnerships. They've got direct membership on them, as well as reorganising themselves organisationally. We have strong leadership and committed partners within our CPP. They get it, they get the value added of us all working together. An example of the Council's commitment to that way of working is the money they put into the Community Investment Fund for our locality partnerships to shape and use. Next slide. Our locality partnerships. Next couple of slides tell you a wee bit more about how these operate. So firstly, our localities partnerships cover all of North Ayrshire. We have 6 of them and they cover our entire geography. They are made up of community reps, so that's community council chairs where the community councils exist, as well as elected community reps, elected members for that local area and community planning partners. Their role is to identify and address local priorities relevant to that locality. It's about value added, so they're not replicating all the work of community planning partners at that local level or all the community work at that level. It's about what else can we do together. As part of the process of establishing our locality partnerships, we disestablished our area committees, and our locality partnerships took on some of those responsibilities that previously sat with area committees, for example, street naming, local grants. So although they took on some of those responsibilities, we very much see them as different bodies. They are community planning at a local level. And in all their discussions, it's about consensus. It's about that parity of esteem between elected members, community reps, coming together and deciding what's best for their local area. Next slide, please. This diagram on the slide gives an illustration of what it might look like around one of those locality partnership tables, and lists some of the community planning partners that join them. We have strong links in place at strategic level to our CPP strategic management team and our community planning board. So there are senior officers from across the partnership that sit on our management team and are also linked to locality partnerships, so that we can show that golden thread throughout the work of the CPP. Next slide. So it wasn't a short process in terms of establishing our locality partnerships. This timeline gives a summary of some of the key features in our development process. We started back in 2014 with pre-engagement with our elected members, testing the water. That led to work with the Consultation Institute, where we trained a wide range of community planning partners in best practice and community engagement consultation, to in turn support us to speak to our communities about locality working, how would they like to work with us. We took recommendations to the Council and CPP and established our first locality partnerships towards the end of 2016. They then worked on developing their local priorities and their local plans. And more recently, they've been looking at how they can spend the Community Investment Fund monies to implement their locality plans. Next slide. A more recent development has been the approval of a pilot from the 1st of April this year, where our locality partnership on the island of Arran will come together with the Health and Social Care Locality Forum to form a joint locality partnership. So there are legislative requirements on the Health and Social Care Partnership to have these locality arrangements, similar to CPPs having their own locality arrangements. Our boundaries for our localities are the same across CPP and Health and Social Care Partnership, and it makes sense for us at this time to bring the 2 Arran groups together as a pilot and see what we can learn from that and what scope there is for that going forward. Next slide. Okay. That was all I want to say at this point in terms of the kind of local context and the community planning context, and I'm going to pass over to Neale now.
Okay, thank you. So next slide, please. This is more about focusing on how the LDP that the council's been working on has taken account of what is an effective, established and productive locality partnership arrangement. So the first slide, just to introduce all that, is the sort of lead in the strategic vision for the LDP. So this, what you can see at the moment is is an extract from the LDP, which is the vision. Now, in terms of what we did with the vision, we didn't, as development plans quite often do, recreate a sort of spatial version of the of corporate values or visions or strategies. We actually directly linked the same vision from the local outcome improvement plan to the LDP, so that all the LDP spatial policies and proposals, strategies and allocations were linked to delivering the local outcome improvement priorities. So we just skip through the animation here, about 6 or 7. What you can see is the extract from the LDP is actually the healthier, working, thriving, safer themes are exactly the same as in the LOIP. So that additional extract is from the LOIP, and notably also that what we did has kind of been in tandem and allied to what the planning bill's been doing, which is seeking to align the LDP visions with community planning visions. So so this is exactly what we've done. There wasn't, we just didn't see the value and tried to recreate an alternative version of the vision for local outcome improvement plan. So we like to do it together. So in terms of actually achieving policies that sit underneath that and allocations and strategies that we know will deliver, there was a lot more work went on beneath that. If you fall into the next slide. This is also an extract from the LDP, and again it's showing the spatial strategy that sits underneath the vision. So this is the spatial strategy, statutory requirement to put a spatial strategy into an LDP and how it delivers the vision. LDPs quite often will use other geographies for this, but we again thought we'll link directly to the local outcome improvement plan and the localities setup that we have here. So if you skip through the animation, I think there's 6 of them, you can see that the locality partnership areas are the locations where we've sort of broken up the geography of the North Ayrshire region to reflect the locality priorities, and those are again reflected in the plan. And underneath that, the strategic development areas are there are strategic development areas within each of the locality areas, and what those are intended to do is be sort of, well, they were what we identified as key areas of change within the plan and for the plan period, in which we'll have opportunities for multidisciplinary action and investments and activity and development activity to come together to deliver some of the key priorities that the locality groups have identified. So these in effect are placemaking priorities, and we've set those out right at the top of the plan. So the vision and the spatial strategy, what the extracts are showing is a sort of the visual representation of those. The next few slides are, if you skip on, to show how, basically what sits under the bonnet of how we did that, and how the policies and the structure of the document actually meaningfully related to the plan. So the diagram's a bit technical and it's not supposed to be read in detail, but it's just a policy map of all the policies in the LDP and showing how we aligned them around the LOIP vision. And there's a few elements to this that I'll talk to. So if you skip on. So what this is showing is that the LOIP vision has the healthier, working, thriving and safer themes to it. But if you go remember back to the slide at the start where the vision was linked to LOIP, there's a series of priorities that sit under each of the healthier, working, thriving and safer themes that are about delivering, what the community planning partnership is working to deliver those priorities. And one of those, just as an illustration, is inclusive growth under the working North Ayrshire theme. And what we've done is grouped the structure of the LDP around about those themes so that we know what policies are delivering those actions. So that includes, for example, town centres, employment land, regeneration land and new homes. We're all tied under that theme within the structure. If you skip on, and sorry, back one. Yeah, so that if you notice as well that it's not just about the local outcome improvement plan themes and the structure group around that. We've also, when we've done the sort of policy map, sort of designed it to understand where we're fitting in with the 4 key themes of Scottish planning policy as well. So what that's helping us to do is, one, it's helping us to structure the development plan so that it's structured in a way that is what the local priorities, locality partnership priorities, have self-identified as what they want to see happening in their area. So so the spatial strategy in the presentation are actually linked to that, and it also helps us to understand how each of the policies that we've got in the plan are contributing towards those goals. Although some of that might be quite intuitive, it has been helpful to be able to map that, to illustrate that, and pass that back. If you skip to the next slide. Underneath the sort of policy mapping, what we've done then is taken each of the policies in the plan and assessed them against a range of factors that it's essentially the qualities impact assessment. We merged that together with the United Nations Rights of the Child scoring factors and grouped them all into the locality partnership themes, and we did an audit of them, so it's a qualitative consideration of how each of the policies in the plan meets each of those factors, to know that its performance in terms of delivering locality partnership priorities has been maximised. What we did at the end of that, similar to strategic environmental assessment, is that we measured the performance and recommended mitigation and applied it where required. Again, there's 2 themes to this, that it allowed us to know how well our policies were performing and what they were doing specifically to meet the priorities of locality partnership. So, for example, for Arran, a focus was rural housing and housing delivery, and that resulted in direct modifications to the policy for housing on Arran to make sure that it was more focused to specific needs of the island. It also allowed us to identify where the policies were already performing well, and most crucially, what it did was we, as a result of this, we inserted a policy directly in the plan, which recognised the locality partnership priorities, which are all different across the localities, and put that in and give it weight as a consideration in decision making on plan applications. If you skip to the next slide, and skip the animation one. Sorry, just go back. Sorry, if you go back one. Yep. So what this approach also helped to do is reaffirm that the strategic development areas that I mentioned earlier were put up front and central in the plan as key areas of change, recognising that those are the key priorities for communities, and that they're likely to be areas where there's multiple action, not just development activity, but community empowerment and that sort of thing coming into play as well. So related to what the place principle says is that we kind of see that as those strategic development areas as where people, location and resources combine to create a sense of identity and address the needs and potential of the communities, crucially shaped by resources, services and assets. So skipping on to what that actually looks like in terms of what the plan looks like to deliver all those things. This is again extracts from the plan for it's part of the urban locality area. What we took we were quite keen that the way the plan was presented wasn't a planner's plan or a developer's plan, but it was actually more of a document that could be picked up and read and understood by communities. So the way that we translated that was to not have big, complex technical maps relating to zonings. So we reduced the scale right down so that the whole settlement can be seen in context. And the zonings have been simplified, and we've put the strategic development areas into those to show where we expect key changes to be happening. What we've also done is reflected the locality priorities for each of the areas in the plan, so you can see those there in the top right of the screen. And we've also given more of a profile into the settlements and localities, which Morna referenced at the start of the presentation, but we've linked that into the plan to show that what the sort of socioeconomic profile and some of the issues and strengths and weaknesses of the settlements are as well. So if you skip on, so the animation is just showing that the strategic development areas that we highlighted in spatial strategy are part of the part of what the plan's showing. Skip on again. So this is one of the strategic development areas, and again, this is right up front in the plan. So these 8 or 9 areas that we've identified as strategic development areas are placed right at the start of the plan, so that a user doesn't need to go and find them or take time to cross-reference policies against each other. It's a clear and visual articulation of what the priorities are within our locality areas. And we see this as being a framework for delivering not just development, so not just physical change to places, but it's more about alignment of various different agendas, including economic and funding priorities. So where there's capital investment, where there's investment opportunities for the private sector, how can we support and promote those, and how can we support the wider redevelopment of the area to make the area more attractive. We've looked at service provision in here, so what you can see in that slide is that there's a lot of stuff to do with the Ardrossan Port, and that's a sort of range of improvements that are planned there, and those are funded by a whole range of different parties to deliver an operationally effective port and connection to Arran. We've got a significant amount of regeneration vacant land, so those priorities are brought in, as well as active travel, to make it more accessible. And these are all anchored on community assets, and the community preferences underpin all of this. So if you can skip the animation. So what that's showing there is the 3 times local priorities are economy, regeneration, and communication. So the way that they're communicating this is obviously crucial, and that's going through locality partnerships as well. But the other things that they've identified are the economy and regeneration. So that's their key focus areas. Again, it's different to all the other localities, but that kind of shaped us leading towards identifying this particular strategic development area in the development plan. And we can skip on again. So just considering what the sort of components of that sort of strategic development area place principle means is that we are looking at the specific attributes of the place. So here, if you skip through the animation, there's about 8 or 9 of them. So you can see the arrows coming up here. The assets, strengths, weaknesses of the area are plentiful in this area. So it's a coastal location, which is a primary sort of economic asset. It's a community asset. It's something that can be explored and exploited in terms of delivering improvements to the community. But at the same time, the large sort of area at the top of the screen is an extensive vacant and derelict site, which is lain derelict for quite some time, and it prohibits and spoils the capacity to access the coast. So that's both a strength. We see that as both a strength and a weakness and a future opportunity. There's obviously what I mentioned, the port, and there's a significant amount of committed investment there from the Scottish Government, the Council, the port operator, it's not only a port and an economic asset, it's the connection to Arran from the mainland. So it's serving a significant social connection between people who visit and work and live in the island in the mainland. There's a marina at the that exists at the moment, and is as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal proposals plans to expand that. The area is immediately adjacent to the town centre. Again, a strength and an opportunity. Town centre has some issues in terms of the the vibrancy of it, and the connection between that and the town centre is vital to capitalise on. There's 1 million passengers travel through the ferry route at the moment. So moving on to the next point is that while there is good connectivity and a ferry link and a rail link and good road links, this connection is somewhat severed by fairly poor pedestrian links. So again, what we're looking at is a town centre that's immediately adjacent to that, but has challenges in terms of maximising and exploiting what it can get off the footfall from the visitors to the town centre from the port. I mentioned the employment land. There's also historic environment assets. There's a Drossan Castle there, and there's an amount of employment land in and around the port as well, which is obviously prime and related to the port. So looking at all of those in the main, we saw that essentially what the community planning partnership saw is that there's a lot of things going on here, a lot of potential strengths, a lot of existing strengths, a lot of weaknesses that we can work to improve. So you skip on. Move on again one, please. So yeah, the solution, what we saw was a solution that's something that sort of the emerging place principle really was sort of ringing out to us about what the answer is here, with such an amount of strengths and weaknesses and opportunities within that sort of fairly small geography. There's potential for lots of things to happen. Lots of things will happen. But it's about making sure that everything is aligned and delivering the maximum to maximise the impact of that. And that really related. We kind of really saw that as linking back to the place principle, which is looking at those responsible for delivering services and looking after assets and planning together to improve the community, to support inclusive growth and create successful places for the people who use that place. So through that, and as an articulation of our commitment to doing that, the development plan identified that as a strategic development area to put the emphasis on collaborative place-based approach, to align all those investments and maximise the impact of those. So if you skip on again. In terms of how that's translating into action, there's a whole series of activities which are ongoing at the moment now, and this graphic is part of the plans for the expansion of the port, but there's also plans for the North Shore area, which is kind of at the top left of the screen at the moment, of the picture. So in amongst that, what we've got is commitments to improving the port facilities, the terminal building, expanding the marina to be one of the largest in Scotland, a whole range of accessibility improvements to make it multimodal, interchange, and crucially to get pedestrian linkage between the port areas, the North Shore area and the town centre. The North Shore area has been the preferred option to start a consultation process for a new campus, which will include primary and secondary school, but also potentially a range of community facilities. And those facilities are delivered by not only the council but other service providers as well. And there's a whole range of commercial opportunities going in and around that. and obviously there's going to be residential at the at North Shore area as well. And this is sort of the output from the identification of this area, strategic development area, and how it will translate into action and delivery. It's funded by, supported by a whole range of bodies, including the council and all its different functions. So it's planning in terms of obviously preparation and development plan, it's community planning, it's education and facilities, assets management. It links to Scottish Government and UK Government funding as well, which is coming through the Ayrshire Growth Deal, which is secure money, but also through things like the Vacant Derelict Land Fund, and commitments to the port investment. There's SPT and Sustrans involvement in the transport solutions, Peel Ports as the port operator, and obviously the Community Planning Partnership, which has got a town centre working group at the moment to look at how the town centre can be in amongst all of those activities and make sure it maximises impact. So that's kind of me. I'm happy to take questions. That was just intended to sort of show the translation of a place-based approach in the plan and how that works in terms of linking into community planning aspirations, as opposed to sort of driving in a different direction from it, or being uncoordinated, and how that's sort of feeding through into delivery of quite a significant impact, which could effectively completely transform the place for the community that live and work in Ardrossan.
Thank you very much. That was great. Oh, Trevor. Yeah. Sorry, Trevor is going back to the start of this. Irene, you've been listening now, and so while we give people a chance to write some questions for Morna and for Neale and possibly for you, so what are your thoughts? Do you have any questions for Morna and Neale here?
Yeah, so I'm Irene Buteman. I manage the Place programme at the Improvement Service. Morna and Neale, thank you very much for expanding on what started with an event we had with you back in October, where you began the explanation of how you were linking the two and agreed to come back and go into a little bit more detail on how your own local development plan is linking in with those local outcome improvement plan priorities. I think it's really interesting. I mean, every authority across Scotland would have to have a different approach because we've got different community planning setups and then different approaches on our local development plans. But there are some real themes there that were coming through around keeping that flexibility, but really honing in on those strategic development areas that most local development plans will have, and they can be looking at, particularly in those areas of change, at how they link in with delivering on the community planning outcomes, whether that be at a locality level, which you've managed obviously in North Ayrshire because of the way that's organised, or whether that be linking in with the broader priorities in a local outcome improvement plan. I thought it was also really interesting that you're linking and using that opportunity to go into other priorities around economic development and not just physical development. A question maybe for both of you is, in doing that process, do you feel that instead of the usual process we have with a local development plan, where you go out and you speak to a community, maybe a main issues level at the very beginning and then a couple of checks along the way, has this meant a more integrated approach with talking to communities as you've developed your thinking?
I'll go first. In the terms of the way that we prepared the development plan, I can't really speak highly enough of the locality partnership setup that we have in North Ayrshire. In consulting on development plans, and I've experienced this before without the same format, is you have to try and meet the consultation requirements, in fact exceed those, to get true community buy-in or input, and you have to design that process from scratch. But what we had the advantage of in North Ayrshire was that there was an existence of locality groups, which we knew covered the whole geography of the area, so that if we were wanting to take something to locality partnership, either to communicate something or to have a workshop with them or to get feedback on proposals, we were able to access access that in a very kind of consistent manner. So we knew that we were going to the North Coast. It was going to be the same, the equivalent representatives from the community there as there were in Arran or in Irvine. So that was really hugely advantageous to us in the plan making preparation process. I think the second part of that was it was up to us as planners to make sure that we translated that feedback and that opportunity into something that was meaningful for the communities. And I think that's where the embedding the LOIP vision, auditing the policies, including the locality priorities directly in the plan, and focusing on the strategic development areas were our main tricks, I suppose, to making sure that we had a plan that was doing the right job and communicating effectively with the community. So we wanted to see them seeing a plan that reflected their aspirations rather than a sort of technical manual or a plan for planners. As I said, we were kind of looking at that sort of thing as, you know, a planner's plan is the last audience we were trying to cater for, almost, because a planner will always need to use the plan anyway, whereas we wanted the communities to see the plan as being relevant to them. Mm-hmm. So the setup was crucial to us achieving a different outcome, and I think we put a lot of effort into to making sure that we respected that and provided an output that was a better one for communities in terms of the way the development plan looks and feels.
I think it's been a process that you've used on a number of occasions. Comes up that planners don't have to always be the ones going out and doing that front loading when there's so much front loading going on in community planning already, that there can be great benefit in having that dialogue and those links there. Christopher, I think you've got some other...
I've got some questions. I don't know if Morna had anything to say to that as well, that question you posed. But
sure, just a couple of brief points from I suppose having that integrated approach to community engagement around the spatial planning aspect was very welcome. I think our locality partnerships made those links, could see the links between the spatial planning development and their local priorities, as Neil just outlined. And also, local people are interested in, you know, what's happened with that bit of vacant derelict land, you know, what can we do about regenerating our town centre? So they got the practical aspect of that as well. I think that was very welcome.
So one of the questions that's come through is, how difficult has it been to get people to think and work outside their own specialty areas?
Will I kick off for that, Neil? Okay. From my perspective, I've not found that challenging, to be honest. I think we've got obviously good working relationships within the council that definitely help that. We've got buy-in at a senior level. I think having that leadership and that strategic buy-in is crucial as well. And some of the organisational arrangements that we use to implement our community planning approach have helped. As we sit, our community planning team sits within democratic services in the council, where we work very closely with our colleagues in the economy and communities around the locality partnership work. So that structural element has also helped too.
Okay, Morna. Yeah, sorry, Neil.
Yeah, sorry. From a planning perspective, I don't think that was. I don't think actually the cost of output that we have in the focus of the presentation was particularly difficult, because it's messages that you know, that everyone can agree with almost, and it came out of the community. They came out of known sort of project development areas that were already happening, so that wasn't tricky. What was a bit more tricky, I suppose, was framing up a development plan that probably looks a little bit different in meeting sort of the expectations of technical stakeholders, because they often expected to see a plan that was you know, a bit more traditional. So when it got to the way that the different elements of the plan policies, we took a sort of plain English wording approach and tried to simplify them down a bit. That sometimes jarred a wee bit with stakeholders of a technical nature, but I think in terms of communicating the message with members, with communities, and other project delivery groups, I don't think there was any issue. It helped actually articulating it like that.
So there are some more specialty knowledge about your area, I believe, questions here. So a question is, did the Go Garnock work from 2016 that you did in Galway, Kilbirnie and Beath provide any evidence base for the current work? That's above my level, but you might know what the question is.
Yeah, the Go Garnock was a charrette that was undertaken a few years ago now. We also did a charrette in the 3 towns, so they're linked to the locality areas. What we also did in terms of setting up the locality priorities was we undertook a place standard event within the localities so that we could prioritise the actions there, and the Go Garnock output fed into that. That was before the place standard set up, I think, whereas the 3 town charrette took place after they were identified, so they did slightly different things. The Go Garnock one fed into the shaping of priorities, whereas the 3 towns one helped refine the priorities and into what actions were required.
Thank you. There's a lot of praise coming in for your work here. One of the questions, it says absolutely brilliant here, seems to represent classic town planning philosophy of planning for people and communities. So how do you think this approach will sit with the proposed new development planning process under the planning bill and the possibility of neighbourhood plans or similar?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of taken heed of what the direction of the planning bill, but also just charged ahead with the requirement to create a plan and, one that we think is fit for purpose for communities. Yeah, I mean, things like what I highlighted in the plan was that the vision for the LDP is not different from the LOIP. They are the same vision, so they are effectively trying to deliver the same thing. And we've got an audit and trail now that we know exactly how and where that's done and how we've improved the performance of that. The locality groups have their own locality plans as well, so they are setting their own priorities. So I think the governance, the structure and the setup lends itself to being able to do, if it isn't already doing that, which it probably is, the setup's allowing it to do that.
Okay. Morna, a question for you.
Sure.
So how are the community reps and the locality groups elected? It says here other than the community council chairs, but...
Sure. Yeah, so you're right. The community council ultimately have a place on the locality partnership, and whether it's the community council chair or another rep, that's fine. The community reps, we invite applications from across members of our communities. We've got a kind of brief application process, a form they fill in, and then that goes to the locality partnership membership to have a look at and decide who they want to bring onto the locality partnership. That's supported by locality officers who do more of a kind of community development role. So they will work with people in the community, speak to them about locality partnership. Have you heard about this? Are you interested in joining us, coming along? We've also got scope for co-opting members, so people that maybe don't want to be a kind of full member of the locality partnership on a long-term basis. If they've got a particular specialism that's relevant to that local priority, we can co-opt members as well.
Okay, there's been also a lot of praise for the maps. So, yeah, Morna and Neale, what has been the feedback from the community groups that you've worked with around the presentations you've given and this work about the locality groups? And
Yeah, people do like the maps. People like the colour, people like the clear images, and people like the maps. And I think when they see this kind of mapping of their local area, it really draws them in, and they can really make those local links.
Yeah, we, as I say, they were designed for community users and maybe non-expert users. We didn't want basically maps that just instantly turn people away, that they couldn't understand what a coding of a policy was. So we have generally received pretty good feedback from community members and people that are sort of working and leading on the projects. They lend themselves well to that, and with inward investment and promotion have also been quite keen on the stylising of them. What has been a bit difficult is in the representations to the proposed local development plan. Again, some of the technical stakeholders found those different to what they normally expected. So made comments to that effect. I mean, I think that, you know, it is ultimately a presentational thing, and ultimately we took the view that we were catered for users that were non-expert first and foremost.
Thank you. There's a quite early question about the community investment fund. Did other partners contribute to this, or was it just the council investing?
It was just council money. The community investment fund came in the council budget for 2017-18. So other community planning partners did not contribute into that package of finance. But as I mentioned briefly earlier on, our community planning partners have been very committed in terms of their officers' time. So this locality partnership work, participating in training, coming along to locality partnerships. So it's really been that kind of resourcing kind, as opposed to the financial aspect.
Okay, great. We are low on questions from the attendees now, so this is probably the last chance to ask some questions, but Irene has some comments or questions. I don't know. Irene?
Oh, a bit of both. Really welcome the mention of the place principle in your presentation, and in moving that forward and working within that principle, and the emphasis that's going to come through in the coming months from Scottish Government on us all working more collectively together. How useful did you find the use of the place standard tool in getting those conversations going? And do you intend to almost go back and use it as a bit of a monitoring at any point?
I think it was a really useful tool for us to use with the members of our, well, at that point it wasn't locality partnerships, so the kind of early consultation we had around the local priorities, it was a really useful tool to use in that community setting. As Neale said, it went along with a range of other resources we had from the charrettes. We had a lot of research and analysis that we presented to localities as well, in terms of the local assets, the challenges, demographic changes over time. There's a range of tools that help them think about their priorities and what would be relevant for their local area. And yeah, we're using various mechanisms to go back and speak to communities about what difference have you found through working with the locality partnerships. Can you feel or see a difference on the ground yet? And we're tailoring those mechanisms to the various localities. Irvine's quite a big locality, so we've split that up into smaller areas. We're having chit-chat events, our locality officers are leading on them, just to speak to people about what they're finding in terms of local developments. But certainly was a really useful tool to help open that discussion up around what the local needs and aspirations.
Okay.
Yeah. Another question actually coming in now. So how will delivery be monitored, and how will it inform sort of future plans?
Of locality partnership work or LDP work, do you think? What's the question focused on?
I think it's around. Sorry, that's what I have right now. Just to, we'll just see if anything else comes in.
In the meantime, I'll come in with something. A real emphasis today was about how you managed to look at all of your local development plan policies and test them against the local outcome improvement priorities. Do you feel that's a process that you could lend to other priorities, say health impact assessment as well, with the new public health body coming on board in the rest later on this year?
Sure, and kind of coincidentally, the chair of our Community Planning Partnership Senior Management Team is Assistant Director of Public Health, NHS Ayrshire. So we're already having a lot of discussions around public health agenda and how that links to the CPP and the LOIP. And we are actually doing a bit of strategy mapping just now across the partnership to look at the wealth of strategies that we all have and what the overlaps are, and just to check that all the right connections and synergies in place.
It does seem to lend itself to that health in all policies approach, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It definitely does.
The development plan policy audit process was effectively an integration of inequalities assessment with the local outcome improvement plan priorities, with the UN rights to the child criteria. There's a whole bunch of those as well that we put in. So just in detail, looking at every policy in the plan and how does it affect that scoring measure. So actually what was coming up quite a lot was, about sort of policies. Quite commonly, the modifications that we put in were just sort of tightening up or enhancing the way that, access to services or access to open space or accessibility, active travel, will come, could be optimised in the plan. So, a lot of the themes that I think relate to health will probably came out of that assessment anyway. But we have as well through the plan process identified that we health impact assessments being accompanied with proposals for development, so that we can judge how the developer sees that it meets the what health benefits it can bring through or enhance through the development proposal.
Oh, so that's
it's kind of there maybe.
For?
We're asking for health impact assessments for development sites.
Excellent, didn't realise that. That's good to know.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's developing this. I think there's probably scope to improve, refine it, and that sort of thing. But I think the themes were probably getting drawn out anyway, and will do when we get proposals in for development.
So do you feel it seems to show that requirement in the Act to align in with local outcome improvement plan priorities is not really that big an ask, because planning does a lot of that. It just needs to assess its policies and tweak rather than a complete change of approach of what planning is doing?
Well, our vision was, with every sort of vision and process for a plan, you kind of go through a process of, landscape horizon scanning to see what policies exist and corporate policies and how you should translate that into spatial vision. And we kind of had a sort of reached a point where we thought, well, what's the point in doing that? What's the point in trying to use another set of words to frame the same things, really? Why don't we just use the local outcome improvement plan? So we did that, and it did simplify that visioning process. And then we concentrated on how we can create or improve the synergies between what planning's doing anyway and the visioning process for the plan and then into the LOIP. So yeah, I don't think it wasn't a majorly disruptive process. It was in some ways easier, in some ways just slight adaptations.
There's a question from the audience. So how important was this process in getting the growth deal?
I think the growth deals typically kind of, well, there's no governance and structure around how growth deals are secured. So there's, a lot of specific working, but we work very closely with the team that were advancing the business cases for the growth deal to make sure they linked into the plan, the strategic development area. So a lot of the impact and change from the growth deals is actually in the strategic development areas. So we were kind of linking in and doing the job of making sure that the community benefits of those were articulated. So, for example, for Drossen that I talked about, there was, a lot of the proposals there are about the growth deal, but that's what the community self-identified as being their priorities, was economy and regeneration. So they are the same thing. So we were just trying to present that in a way that the alignment ensured that, it's not just a one-dimensional thing if you're focusing on the economy or communities, it's both. I think one of the pleasing comments that we had about that particular one was, someone recognising that it was actually a community-focused thing, but it was equally just in the same context, it was an inward investment promotion tool. So it's catering for two audiences at once.
Thank you. We're getting close to the hour now for the webinar. I have one last question here. It's probably for both of you, but it's worded how to inform the local development plan in terms of community aspirations where there is disparity in terms of participation between communities. Okay,
I'll pick up on that. First of all, yeah, we certainly acknowledge that our locality partnership work is not yet reaching all of our North Ayrshire residents. It doesn't have that impact yet, and that's something that we're looking to develop, obviously, going forward in terms of co-opting other members, widening our community representatives, and also going out into community with our locality partnerships and doing events. Obviously, coming along to locality partnership meeting is not for everyone, so definitely working closely with the locality officers to go out and have conversations in places that people are, and being more creative around that. We've also got work around a community engagement centre of excellence that I think will support us as CPP going forward.
Yeah, in terms of the plan, yeah, it's a journey, and I said I can speak highly enough of the community plan process. I think that the governance and the people that has around the table, it's a game changer in terms of how we can engage and ensure parity of engagement across the whole geography of the area. But as Morna says, that will continue to work to develop and try and maximise participation. What we're also doing in conjunction between planning and community planning is we've got another one of the charrettes at the moment, which is sort of early, in the early stages. It's for co-winning, and the focus on that is actually genuinely about health and inequalities and increasing participation. And the reason we picked co-winning is because there's some real disparities in terms of the outcomes for people in that place. So it's got the highest expectation for males in Scotland at 92. In a locality, it's about a mile away from a life expectancy of 71 for males. So, there's real inequality there. And there's also a divergence in the way that participation is happening. So we're deliberately focusing on, charrette work on trying to access more hard to reach communities and producing outcomes that are not just, for example, a simple public realm scheme. It's more about how can we genuinely support greater interaction, engagement, and outcomes that are meaningful for the community.
Okay. Thank you. I have had another question coming in. I'll just say now that we are on the hour that thank you everyone for attending. Those that have to leave now, thank you very much. I will be sending out a survey next week, sort of asking about feedback for this, and this is really important to inform further webinars around the community planning support in Scotland and possibly also spatial planning and place standard. So thank you very much for attending, and it will be really helpful if you will help filling out the survey. If you're okay, Neale and Morna, we'll just take another question here, and I think that we'll call it a day. Irene might have something as well, but otherwise we'll call it a day afterward. It's been very interesting presentations. Thank you very much, and so much to be praised on in terms of applying pragmatic, common sense approach to joining up strategic planning processes. So I'm interested in the monitoring processes that will now happen to measure the so what and what outcomes and impacts there are from this different approach. Do you have anything planned for that around evaluation or measuring these? What has happened now that you've done it differently?
I mean, I can pick up on, particularly in terms of monitoring the impact of our locality partnership work, and maybe Neale wants to add on to that afterwards. So obviously we've got a range of local priorities, so we can measure improvement in terms of those local priorities, whether it's employability in some areas, what's the difference over a couple of years in terms of those employability stats. We're also complementing that with survey work that we do in North Ayrshire. So that's more around people's perceptions of life in North Ayrshire. We do survey work with our locality partnership members as well. What difference do they feel they're making? So we've got a kind of range of mechanisms that we're using specifically around locality partnership work.
Yeah, on monitoring, and I'll link this to the question that we weren't sure from earlier about delivery. From a delivery of development and change in places, and monitoring that, obviously there's been a different approach here, and we want to translate that into how we do the action programme, which will assist us with monitoring how effectively we're delivering the plan. So that's something we're working through at the moment, but we're trying to get that in line with the Council's capital plan programme, so that we're linking the financing of the projects and the profile of how and when investments are going to be made with the programme. We're also trying to link it into the council's asset management process, so that we know forthcoming opportunities or issues to deal with, and linking that into sort of housing development, that sort of thing. So basically, it's next on our agenda. The proposed plan is not adopted yet, so that's work that's ongoing, and we're really genuinely want to try and do something meaningful here, because I think that action programmes quite a lot of the time for development plans can be fairly static documents, which I don't think they're supposed to be. So we're trying to make them a bit more dynamic, and probably the key thing is linking that to capital expenditure. That's what we're trying to do. I think Edinburgh's done that well, so it's about sort of that direction of travel.
That's what I was just going to say, Neil. There's a recording of Edinburgh that presented, I think it was a year ago now, on what they've done with their action programme, and that's on the Planning Skills website. That's a good sort of starting point for anybody looking at an authority that's really about, I think on the day we assessed, about 6 years ahead of how they were doing their delivery around that, and tying in with corporate plans as well.
Yeah, I think I have to stop you all now. It's been really great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Morna. Thank you, Neil. We had some technical difficulties, but you came through really well. And thank you for taking your time. And thank you, everybody, for taking part in this. We've had representatives from Shetland tuning in. We've had Dumfries and Galway, Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow team. So we've had from all over. So it's been really, really interesting. We will be sharing the recording of this in the Community Planning Network K-Hub group. So you can all access it there. I will send out links about that. I believe you will be sharing.
I think we'll put it on our planning skills page, and then we'll link it into the Partners in Planning website as well.
Yeah, we will send some links out along with the survey when you get that next week. But thank you very much for attending, and I will now end the webinar for all. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.